The descendants of Baron Samedi are a mysterious lot, and that's just the way they like it. Prior to the family reunion, they universally had horrifying, rotting contestants, often making them easily confused for Nosferatu. Prior to the family reunion, their control of necromancy made them seem like bastard offspring of the Cappadocians. Prior to the family reunion, if the Samedi talked about the Baron at all, they were just as likely to claim that he was a Loa as a vampire. Now, the Hecata are one big, happy family, right? The Samedi even got their looks back, although the rot and decay peeks out whenever they feed. But these kindred are steeped in voodoo and hoodoo, and they know that everything comes with a price. Nothing comes for free. So they don silk hats, smoke fine cigars, and plan to enjoy the ride until the bill comes due. Laissez le bon temps de rouler. Let the good times roll. Greetings, Kindred. I am Voivode Maquette, and welcome back to another episode of Metaplot Monday on our World of Darkness. And today we're going to be doing another lore sheet, specifically Descendants of the Baron, which can be found in the Cults of the Blood Gods book, and it is a Bloodline Hecata character-only lore sheet. This is one of the lore sheets that digs deeper into the family lines, very much similar to the Descendants of Tenochtitlan, which we already covered. But this one actually covers a more well-known bloodline, where we're not dealing with a family from the Giovanni. We're actually dealing with a bloodline, which also happens to be related to them. In the Vampire the Masquerade clan novels, also known as the Fall of Atlantis series, it highly hints that the first Samedi was a sixth or fifth or something, is a low generation Cappadocian from Egypt who packed himself up in a box and mailed himself to the New World when the Giovanni decided that they were going to start going on their family purge. I'm not really sure how canon that is. I've always seen those novels as canon, personally. But in that case, the Descendants of the Baron, the Samedi themselves, would actually just be surviving Cappadocians that are considered their own bloodline due to the fact that their clan weakness that the Cappadocians used to suffer, which was basically they can't make themselves look living, became so much worse, and they just started to rot, possibly because of exposure to the tropical climate that they ended up landing in. Who knows? But the fact is, the Baron is a very much active character in 5th edition, and he has given us this wonderful lore sheet to work off of. In the story that I'm currently running right now, which is Thicker Than Water Black Sheep, which is focused specifically on the Hecata, we have one Samedi player character who is Hattie, and she's very much enjoying the Samedi lifestyle, having been embraced probably the furthest back of any of the characters, I believe. Also, having to have lived up to until recent times looking like a corpse, not being able to do anything about that. And now the lore sheet here states that when the family reunion happened and the Lamia's curse, also known as the grip of the damned or the Giovanni's bite, was given to the entire family, and all of their family weaknesses for some reason just dissolved because it was replaced by the Lamia's curse. They got better. I mean, I guess it's an odd thing to say, but they still do have that curse peak out slightly when they're feeding, which has got to be awkward when the person is already screaming in pain. um, when it comes to, looking like a dead body suddenly when they're biting. As a storyteller, I basically say that if you're a member of the Samedi Bloodline, specifically if you have the Samedi Loresheet, when your teeth come into contact with blood, you revert back to how you looked before. It's just something that I do, but it does seem to work very well, at least in the narrative prospect, and I'm happy with it. So why don't we go ahead and see what this lore sheet has to offer to people interested in playing one of the Descendants of the Baron. Investing one trait into this lore sheet gets you CSI shit. As one of the Baron's children, you've learned a few tricks about death. One of them is knowing a lot about rot, decay, and how bodies die. By carefully examining a mortal corpse, you can immediately know the cause of death. If the cause of death is supernaturally concealed, you gain the ability to roll despite that. So, if something is typically supernaturally concealed, you can tell. You can at least do a test to see if you can see through the illusion. I think one of the best way of putting that is the lick of a vampire, which is actually something that is pushed very forward to masquerade control, but isn't really thought about that much, other than the fact that it hides things. But it is, if you think about it, a mystical way of hiding death. If someone was to bite into, feed, and exsanguinate a human, and then they lick the wounds to hide the fact that they had taken all that blood, yeah, there's going to be a lack of blood, but where is the wound? In this instant, I would probably roll a test, and if there was even one success, I would probably have it so that the Samedi in question, the Hecata in question, who has this lore sheet ability, can notice that there are indents where the teeth had entered, and where the tongue had healed over the top layer of skin had not really healed the track of where the fangs entered. There's lots of different things that you can do with this, but that is just an example. Investing 2 traits into this lore sheet gets you Exquisite Corpse. At one time, the Samedi all looked like walking corpses, but thanks to the family reunion, they have brand new, respectable faces. But you can go back to looking like a corpse whenever you want. What's more, you can look like someone else's if you try hard enough. Once per session, you may take on the appearance of a corpse you've touched, including all the rot and smell of its current age. To notice revealing errors, observers can make a resolve plus awareness test against your resolve as a difficulty. So that's pretty neat. I like the idea that you can roll against someone using this to see if you can go, oh, that's not the same body. And most people wouldn't even attempt to do that, but I can see where some of the Hecata might. And considering the fact that, and we'll end up covering this in a couple of traits over, some of the Samedi actually have ties with the followers of Set, or the Ministry, that could come to a point of mistrust, possibly Hecata working against Hecata. But I don't know. It's just something that catches my attention, and I think I like that a lot. Investing 3 traits into this lore sheet gets you Hollow Inside. Sure, you and the Baron's children don't look like corpses anymore, but some of you still have the advantage of being one. Like the fact that corpses can't feel much of anything anymore. You don't lose 2 dice from relevant dice pools for being physically impaired, although you will still retain the penalty for impaired willpower. So that's pretty cool. That's kind of like the old Malkavian merit deadened nerves. You don't feel pain. You don't suffer from the negative happens of having wound penalties. So that's pretty neat. I like the fact that they're tying that into the whole dead body aspect of the Samedi themselves. Investing 4 traits into this lore sheet gets you My Settite Friend. The Samedi have a strange relationship with the Ministry. There's a lot of overlap in interests, and more than a few have decided to join the Ministry rather than stay with the Hecata. You have a connection with the Ministry, whether it's one of those wayward Samedi or another follower of Set. You can ask your friend for a favor once per story, which translates to the equivalent of 3 dots in the appropriate background, such as allies, influence, and resources. This is what I was talking about before, the fact that the Samedi tend to have a connection with the Settites. And this kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier about how in the novel, the founding member, the Baron, if we want to call him that, I'm actually more happy with the term that they called him in the book, the Dead Man. He had a connection with Egypt, and he actually fought someone in the book using Serpentis. So it does show that they do have some overlap, that they do have some connection. It kind of brings back a lot also when we look at what some people would call the Serpents of the Light, which are the Settite anti-tribute of the Sabbat, who don't tend to really exist much anymore, but that's not for lack of saying that the Settites can't be within the Sabbat anymore. It's just that the Sabbat don't recognize clans anymore, so they don't use the monikers of anti-tribute, for the most part. But the idea that the Samedi are intertwined with the Settites is interesting, and I like the fact that you can call on them to get 3 dots of an appropriate background for the situation. You're not stuck with one thing. You can hop around depending on what you're doing in that storyline. And for me, I try to wrap up a story within a month, but I guess thicker than waters. I guess Black Sheep is proving that sometimes just doesn't work out quite right. Investing 5 traits into this lore sheet gets you the Silk Hat. No one is entirely sure who the Baron is, but they do know you have his favor and are the next in line to the barony, whatever that is. You're not entirely sure what will happen if you step up and claim the Silk Hat of the Baron. It may be a purely political position within the Hecata, or it may invest you with fantastic spiritual powers. It'll certainly invest you with the Baron's enemies. Before you accept the role, however, you have the effect of Mala at 5 dots, although the help comes in cryptic ways, via mysterious actions. You have the Baron as a Mala. That's pretty damn cool. Also, oh my god, you're the heir to an immortal creature. You could be the next Baron if someone kills the Baron. We're talking about one of the few clans that don't seem to be suffering from the beckoning at all. They still have elders active. They still have premisines active, if you understand what that means. The Baron is such a mysterious figure, and it could very well be that he has wraiths watching you. This could very well be similar to the Guardian Angel merit that older systems used to have, where there's some mysterious benefactor who's making sure that you are taken care of and making sure that if you get into a scrape, you get out of it, or something like that. There's so many different ways a storyteller and a player could work together to make this a very interesting thing to have. And I like the fact that there are no actual, like, set rules on what it means. It's a scapegoat. It works really perfect for the situation, and I like that. It's also one of those things where it seems like it could be very big, but also it's 5 points of Mala that are going to help you out in some fashion. I would also act that as like 5 points in retainers when it comes to protecting you or something like that. Like, it's one of those traits that, like, it's calling it Mala, but it could really be anything, depending on what you need for a specific situation. And then what happens if a player attains it? What happens when that character becomes something that powerful? Do you let them continue to play? Do you take them out of the game because they're much too politically inclined, too powerful politically to continue playing off in a game? It's one of those things where you really need to weigh out the options of how you're going to handle it, but definitely make it worth it. So that is Descendants of the Baron. I'm a huge fan of the Samedi. I always have been. They've always been one of those mysterious clans, bloodlines that don't really have that much of an illuminated backstory, much like the Daughters of Cacophony. It's just you find scraps, you find homebrew clan books and things like that. But they always did have a very interesting way of doing things. Even their old power, Thanatosis, really did seem like it was a newer, evolved form of the old Cappadocian Mortis. And the fact that they could learn necromancy at no additional cost, just they started on the bone path instead of the sepulchral path. There was just so many fun little side rules to it. And for the most part, they did seem to be learning the necromancy that they were learning, if not from each other, then by wraiths, which is always something neat. And I really like the fact that in Cult of the Blood Gods in 5th edition, it's showing that the Samedi have taken on more of a spiritual leadership of the Hecata. They are acting as the priesthood. And that's a lot more important than someone might think, because these guys are ambassadors to the other side. These are the few necromancers, the users of Oblivion, that wraiths don't hate instantly. They might be terrified of them at first, but the Samedi have a reputation of working with wraiths, working with them side by side. You can tell that through some of the powers that they themselves have given to the rest of the Hecata to show their loyalty, to bend a knee, to show fealty to the family, such as being able to be ridden by a wraith. That takes an amount of trust that most necromancers are not going to have. And that can actually be looked at when you think about the old Sepulchre path with the Giovanni, because a lot of people don't realize this, but the Giovanni are the founders of necromancy when it comes to Vampire the Masquerade. When you go back deep enough, you have and this should be a TLDR at this point, but if you go back deep enough, the Cappadocians had Mortis. They had the ability to replicate the appearance of a corpse. They had the ability to use their blood to create risen retainers and things like that, but it was all zombies. It was all bodies. It was all everything. You look at the Lamia, and they had control over the 4 humors of the human body, the sanguine aspects of what the fluids in the body can do to humans, and poisons and disease. That was Lamia. And the Giovanni were originally brought in specifically to teach the Cappadocians how to interact with the spirit world. The Samedi had taken this to a whole new world because they work with the wraiths, where the Giovanni found a way to utilize their potent personalities against wraiths. One of the first most damning powers to prove this is the old discipline of torment, where you hit a wraith. They brought in powers to call, ensnare, dominate, and harm wraiths with their own rage. And it's even described in the books as a lot of Giovanni, even though they don't need to, they would act out a punch or a backhand just to harm these wraiths and beat them into submission, where you've got the Samedi who are now trying to join the dead and the undead together in a partnership. I think that the Samedi have a lot to give, and I cannot wait to see what happens to them in the future. I hope we get more information about the Hecata later, specifically the bloodline of the Samedi. Thank you for joining me. I am Voivode Maquette, and this has been Metaplot Monday on Our World of Darkness, where we've just gone over the Descendants of the Baron Bloodline lore sheet. If you enjoyed what you're watching, please do not forget to hit the like button. Give a comment down below if you've done anything with this or if you plan to, storyteller and player alike, and subscribe also if you're not already. Please also remember that this is a community to share the knowledge of Vampire the Masquerade as a game, and if you have any friends who play who are trying to get into it but are having a hard time, send them my way, share this video, and we will continue along with that. I will see you next time in the next video for Metaplot Monday, where we will be covering the Flesh Eaters. Have a good evening.